Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us on Synagogue Tech Forum. We're here to help you deliver a better online experience, both for the service. Sorry, I'm just got that to fix. We're here to help you deliver a better online experience, both for the services and education in the Jewish space online. This week, we have Rabbi Dan Moskovitz from Vancouver covering the most amazing Zoom machine I think I've ever seen created for meetings and for learning. That'll be followed by a number of questions on live streaming, Zooming, and that have come up on various social media channels. If you have any questions, you, the audience, please put them in on where you're watching. So if you're watching on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, please put the questions in the chat there. We will be able to see them. If you're watching in Zoom, and you can see the questions come up there on the QA button there. So first off, I'd like to quickly introduce the panel. I'll get them to introduce themselves this is our second episode in the new series. So first up is my co-host and introduces David. Welcome, David.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Rabbi Dan Moskovitz, who quickly reminded us in the chat. I'm your Torah tech guy. I'm thrilled to be here with all of you, and I can't wait to see this Zoom machine.
After David, it's going to be one of those, isn't it? Rotem.
Yo. I'm Rotem from Israel. I'm doing live streams and all kind of Zoom stuff, and here to answer some questions.
Also joining me on the panel today and doing the switching, the hardest job that I've handed over, is Tobias.
Hello, everyone. I'm a rabbi in Minneapolis and glad to be here.
Next up on my list, Michael, where are you, Michael? I can never remember.
I'm up in Olympia, Washington, way up in the upper left-hand corner of the United States. So,
are you close to? Is snow coming to you, Michael?
Snow is usually always here. The nice thing about out here is we can drive up to see it and then go back home where it's nice and not snowy. So it's a pretty cool place. I enjoy living here.
Isn't that how most people say about the grandchildren? They have them and then just
they
hand
can
them
go
back.
see them.
So
Exactly. So,
and
yep.
Also joining us today is Marty.
Hi, Leo. Marty Atias here. I am on the other coast from where Michael is in Maryland, and I am the host of our sister program, the Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum.
Great, thank you, Marty. So, and I'll get his name right this time. Dan, it's all over to you to show us this amazing device that you've created.
Thank you. Thanks. It's great to be with you all. I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And let me show you what we've got here. So I'm speaking to you on an OWL camera. I'm guessing many of you are familiar with that. And I apologize for the echoey nature. I'm in our social hall because we have a seniors group in our meeting space. I'm sure you've all experienced that kind of thing as well. So let me show you what we created first, and then I can explain what it is. So this is Yanni. We call it Yanni because, well, Yanni was Jan Schuf for OWL, and Yanni was a 1970s, I guess you could call it mood rock. I don't know what you would call it. So we created this cart. I'd actually seen something similar to this on a church video someplace. So I can't claim that I created this, out of nothing. But I think we've refined it and made it a bit more polished than the one that I had seen. What we've got going on here is, of course, we've got an OWL camera, and then we've got a Mac Mini. This is not an M1, although it wouldn't matter because we're splitting the signal. It's coming out through an HDMI cable into a 4-way HDMI splitter. So we're not driving 4 monitors separately off of the computer, but rather just mirroring the output through the HDMI splitter. And then these are 32-inch televisions that we got as inexpensively as possible on Amazon. I had sent David the purchase list. Maybe we can put that in the link in the chat at some point. It was in
Where did you send that? I didn't see that. I'm
That's in our
thrilled
original.
that you did. Okay.
My original post had it, so if you can find it.
Gotcha. Yes, I got you.
And so we've got 4 televisions mounted on a utility cart. We purchased the cart for this purpose. I don't know, it's nothing special about the cart other than it's metal, and that made it easier for us to screw into. And our incredible tech guy, Ira Jordanson, who put this all together, was wise enough to use self-tapping screws. And he said that made all the difference as he put the brackets on. It didn't have to drill holes and then put the brackets on. In fact, the owl itself, as it has a standard microphone adapter at the bottom, is actually screwed into the cart. We were worried a little bit that it might fall off. And then we made a little yarmulke for it because they don't make a lens cap for the owl. And then we put together these instructions, which are taped to the cart. And as you can see, they're pretty self-explanatory. The idea is that this will be self-sufficient and that any of our groups that are using our meeting space, we can have this in that space and they should be able to turn it on and set up a Zoom meeting on their own. So the real beauty of this, I think, is that when you are meeting in a classroom setting, as you can see, I'm looking straight across the cart, straight across Yanni, and I can see the Zoom that's going on in front of me, or if this was a PowerPoint or a screen share. It's right in my line of sight, but I'm also looking at the people across from me. So as I just have 2 tables set up here, but you can see that everybody's looking in the proper direction for the conversation, and there you are. It works really nicely. So that's the cart. We also, I should mention that we run it off of a wireless keyboard. This is a Logitech, forget the model number on this one. It's the K400 Plus. And what's nice about it is it's got an integrated touchpad, trackpad, and it's a Bluetooth keyboard, so we don't have to worry about mouse and having tablecloths and having a mouse track on that and everything. So it cost about, I'm trying to remember, it cost about $2,500 US to put all this together. The most expensive part, of course, was the camera. We had the computer, and the televisions. Everything in Canada is more expensive, but the televisions were about $300 each, $250 each. And this is Yanni.
Rabbi, can you tell us, forgive me if I missed it, I was looking for your post. The computer that it's running on is what?
It's a Mac Mini. It's not a Mac Mini.
Okay. And you're powering all 4 of those displays from the one Mac Mini?
Correct. As I was saying before, we're actually splitting the signal. If I can get you in here to see it.
It's a HDMI splitter.
So there's an HDMI splitter in amongst all the guts of that. We put it on these articulating arms really just so we could get the proper spacing between the televisions and the cart. The other nice thing is we measured, or Ira measured, to make sure it would fit through our doors. Consider 32 inches is a pretty wide door, and it's a little bit more than 32. So something to think about when you build this. Do you have double doors it can go through? The other thing, I'm quite worried that we're going to bang one of these screens into something. I'm trying to think of what would be a reasonable, I don't know, cage to put around it or something to protect the screens, but it has to roll with it. So I haven't quite figured out what to do there, but I'm pretty sure we're going to bang the corner in one of these. And
screens. You need another big yarmulke for the monitors.
Can you talk a little bit about the practical application? So you have a group of people sitting around these tables. How I know that, or at least my experience with the owl is that the distance from it is a bit limited when it comes to audio. Can you talk about how you've been using this and how it's been successful in ways that maybe it could be better?
So we've really only had it up and running for about 3 weeks. We've used it in this space, in this social hall. And as you can hear, it's quite echoey. We have it's our Jewish information class, but it's an Intro to Judaism course. It has about 35 students in it. And with COVID and wanting to provide social distancing, it becomes quite a large rectangle. So we place it in the middle of a rectangle and everybody's sitting on the outside. It doesn't work so well in large rooms without walls where the sound can bounce off of. The sidelines are fine, but the camera, as you can see, I'm actually only probably, I don't know, 2 meters away from the camera or 6 feet away from the camera, if that. And the way that the owl fisheyes the view, I'm quite far away and quite small. So we're thinking that for larger meetings, we should really get a second owl and make another Yanni without the computer, but you could then replicate the splitter again to put that signal out another, probably 3 times, because you wouldn't need the other screen. And you can run the owls in a paired function to each other, so they'll switch depending on where the speaker is. In our smaller meeting room behind me, which is where I taught with it the other night, it worked pretty well. I still find that the owl camera is probably the weakest part of this whole thing, is it doesn't always track the way that I would like it to. Somebody's talking or, I don't know, loudly drinking a cup of coffee, sometimes it'll track that person when the speaker is clearly the one that you want to have in frame. So we use it for classes. We intend to use it for meetings. Right now our board meetings are still all on Zoom, but the idea is that when we come back, this would be for a hybrid environment, and that we could comfortably have a real meeting with people online and in person without it being everybody turning to look at a screen or forgetting the people that are online.
And then the interface that we're seeing right now, like your view, the upper view, that is the long one, and you're below it. This is the owl. Everything is done by the owl. You need to set it up. How are you doing that?
So that's built into the owl. It's a function of their software. And if I move over to this side, it should split the screen and follow me over here and still keep that other shot. And hopefully, there it is. I'm backlit, and I apologize for that. But it'll do this, and it'll keep sort of, it doesn't add, I haven't seen it do 3 boxes. It might. But you have that panorama view of what's going on. And, and if I move, it's supposed to follow me around the room. So we'll see if it does that as I'm walking around. See, this is the thing about the owl. There I am now. So it takes a little bit of time to catch up with you. I don't love that, but that really wasn't the whole thing. The point was to make sure that when we had meetings, you at least could feel like you were present with those that are on a hybrid. So here I am on the other side, and it hasn't figured out that I'm standing over here. Now it did.
Then you have a 3-up for your question. There is a 3-up. Yeah. But my question is like the view that we're seeing right now. So you have like the long view and the 3-up. This is the default of the owl, or it's something that you set up on the owl?
That's the default of the owl view.
You can change that. You can get rid of the strip up at the top. And I just wanted to mention also that the way the owl is acting differently than, say, a Facebook portal or the new iPads, which actually track you. The owl isn't actually tracking you. It's cropping the large view, which is why it takes a little time. I was watching, they just announced a couple of days ago, the owl whiteboard, which is a new whiteboard camera. And it was interesting because in the demo, it was very, very delayed, just like you were just showing. And I was really surprised that they did this demo with showing such delays. But I've experienced that with the owl camera also, but that's again because it's figuring out where you are, cropping the shot instead of actually tracking you. So it's a weakness, but.
Yeah. I think all of this technology will get better with time yeah, go ahead, Tobias.
No, just perhaps I wonder if in a more easy to listen to room, whether it would have an easier time identifying a new location.
No, it does. So when I took it into our meeting room, which is on the other side of this air wall behind me, it's a smaller space, though it's still quite large, but it tracked a lot better.
Do you know if its tracking decisions have any visual component? Like if someone was all of a sudden waving in another spot, would it go to them or only audio?
My understanding is it's video and audio that's picking up motion as well. We can try that out though. Let me walk over here and see what happens.
it's audio only for what it's worth. I mean, it's fun to see him go off to the side and flail his arms around, but it's audio. It's audio only.
Actually, I read in the manual, Rabbi Dan, that if you move your neck like an owl, it'll jump to you.
So here I am, and it still hasn't picked me up.
Nope. So I think it's audio. Yeah, as David said. Mm-hmm.
Here it's not.
Hey, Rabbi, I have another question for you. So when I've used the owl in the past, or when people have come to me with questions about using the owl, I've often suggested having a display, a TV, as you will, as part of the circle. So, you know, in where one of the chairs would otherwise be, that's where you put the display. And I'm wondering, have you seen from the participants that you've been using this with, and I know it's only been a couple of weeks, has this kind of contraption, has it benefited the meeting? Has it increased participation? What have people felt and thought about it?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Our remote students, I should say our in-class students like it a lot because they wouldn't look at the screen that was, let's say if I was at the front of the class and I had a projected screen with the Zoom behind me, they wouldn't look at it, and I as the teacher like it a lot also. Because unless I had my laptop open in front of me, and I don't like to teach that way, and I move around, I can see those students, and if they raise their hand or something, or even if something pops up in the chat. The online folks, and this is why I think I want to get a second camera, find the image to be a bit far away, and this tracking issue. Generally, when we do that class, there's a question and a lot of lecture. Question and then a lot of me talking, probably too much of me talking. So it will get that, especially if they ask a longer question. But I think we need to better dial in the OWL audio tracking. So they're not having as good of an experience as we would like, but they said it's still better than when we just had a front-facing camera for a Zoom session, because they felt more included in the conversation. People will talk to them on screen like I'm talking to you right now, but I could also talk past you to someone on the other side of the table. David, are you still there?
Yeah. So one, I think generally I've seen this, and it sounds for you as well, the OWL not being recommended as a worship solution. Could you imagine a small minion that usually only has 15 people showing up and 15 people online? Do you think that would be a useful device for that, or it doesn't seem to fit that model?
Not for this cart. I mean, I think because it's really, unless your minion is in a circle, then if you were going to be doing that kind of davening, then actually it'd probably be working very nicely. But if everybody is facing generally in one direction, I think a more frontal presentation, and I think it'd be quite distracting if the camera was picking up this person davening here and that person who's davening louder over there. So I don't think it's designed for worship services.
Dan, have you ever used the OWL has the software allows you to actually control where the camera goes as opposed to let it auto switch. Have you ever used that?
No, actually I didn't know that. That's I will look into that. And you told me since we started, there's now a Mac version of that.
Yeah, you can override the auto switching. I'm not sure that it's a great solution, because ultimately, I think the even with the downsides to the OWL, the benefit is it just kind of follows you and picks you up, and you don't have to really think about all that. But it is there. So if you were doing something more frontal, and this is what you had, you didn't have another screen on a cart with another camera, you could actually just fix it on one point in space. So
yeah, so you could use it, I guess, in both modes. What else can I tell you about it?
To me, the interesting thing, as you've said about the OWL, is that you're able to use it when you don't need somebody out there. I take it down. Do you find that you need to have somebody operating the meetings that you have, or it's plonk it in the middle of the room, get it set up, connect, and whatever happens, the meeting can continue without needing a Zoom operator?
Yes, and that was why we wanted this, because, you know, like many of us, as we're coming back into our buildings, you know, the support that we're using just to get our services off the ground, we didn't want to have one of our staff people set up what we hope will be a normal function. I mean, we plan to leave this in our meeting room most of the time, right in the middle of sort of how our meetings are set up. And if you can turn on a computer and start a Zoom, then you can use Yanni. Some of our members can't turn on a computer or use a Zoom, and so we deal with that.
Do you think that Yanni that you got the right height for Yanni, or?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and I should come back to my remote camera here to give you a sense of this. So as we were thinking about it, we really, and Ira again, our tech guy, really put a lot of thought into just how high can we make the camera so that it's getting me, and I think I'm well framed here, but it's not blocking my view of others. And it really isn't. It's really in a nice line of sight. I mean, this is pretty much at eye level, and this is what I'm seeing as I look out across the room. And it doesn't get in the way. So yeah, I think that the height was actually quite perfect. If I had thought ahead, I would have measured it for you, but I'm going to guess, since the table is 29 inches, and this looks to be about 10 inches above that, that we're probably 37, 38 inches from top to bottom.
And by the way,
when I look at it,
sorry,
when I look at it, I look at you, the framing of you, which is, I think, a key importance of how I want to see the person that I'm looking at the remote end, and it looks the right height. You're pretty much eye level, and I could see that if you had somebody over the other side, you'd be talking to them, and this thing is not taking out your eye level.
Exactly.
I think I could maybe even put the owl on another 6 inches of stand, and maybe that would help it listen without the screens getting in the way at all, and maybe change that sightline for the video a tiny bit better, perhaps. David?
I want to make a counter argument to that, actually. Sorry, Rabbi Dan. Just sort of so you're right. I think Tobias is right that lifting up could do some sightline. But one of the things that I like about the way that you have it set up is that when you look at the screens, you're looking essentially at the camera, because the camera is just peeking over the screens. And so when it comes to making eye contact, and this is something I've noticed with a lot of rabbis, that it is so much more natural when there are human beings in the physical room to pay attention to them and to look at them and to forget about the fact that there are people in the Synagogue or, you know, in Zoomland. And so having that camera right just peeking over the screen, I think makes a lot of sense when it comes to making eye contact with folks. I've another question, but you can address both if you want. The audio. So, do you hear your Zoomers just through the Owl speaker, or do you have the audio coming out from somewhere else?
We could run the audio through the speakers on the TVs or something if we want. The Owl has a fantastic speaker, and I was worried because of that microphone array that if we were running an external speaker. Ira, you want to meet the tech synagogue folk? Ira happened to walk into the room. Ira's the one who built it. I dream it, Ira builds it, and then he fixes whatever I dream.
Ira, come say hello.
Well, hello. How's it going? And now we get to have the benefit of this camera where it'll split screen.
So
Very
nice.
nice.
Actually only with us for another 2 weeks or so. It was one of the silver linings of the pandemic is they stopped doing rock concerts, and Ira's a sound engineer for rock shows. So he's going to go back to doing gigs, but I have him on speed dial because he set up a whole system in our sanctuary. And he, as I said, he was the one that put this whole contraption together. Ira, anything you want to tell them about how anything you ran into as you were building it, or any challenges you had?
So the main considerations that I had to think about were the size of the doorways in the building, so that this thing, because it doesn't have a narrow side, has to be able to fit through all the doorways. So I had to size the TVs. And then I also had to get the mounts to fit on the cart so that the TVs all edge to edge match. So it was a lot of physical planning. So you can see how there are two different kinds of TV mounts, one for the skinny side, one for the long side of the cart. So it's mostly just physical planning of the setup. The technology side is pretty straightforward. It's just a computer with a wireless keyboard and mouse combo running to an HDMI splitter to a couple of TVs.
And are those all Visa mounts?
Yes. Yeah, two different kinds with just enough flexibility amongst them to get all the edges nicely lined up.
With this current with Yanni, what do you think would be the perfect meeting size of in-person participants to have the right proximity to the screens and what have you?
Where we're at now is pretty good. So what are we at?
So these are, if we did 4 8-foot tables in a square, that would be optimal. When we add and we go to rectangle, that's where we get into this sort of shotgun view from either end. So the one thing I did learn was that to teach from the long end, not the short end, in a room, so that the camera was closer to me when I was speaking. But I can do that because, again, the screen's on all 4 sides, so that doesn't prevent me from keeping the Zoom folk connected to what's going on.
Tobias, I don't know if you can pull up my, there you go. So this is actually the original post that you had from the original post that you had on Facebook. And as soon as I saw this, the rabbi that I work with here and I both said, how is that owl working in that rectangular shape? But of course you've said that, it's really not ideal for those long distances. But here are just some of the shots. And I assume, is this the meeting room that you usually use it in?
No, actually, what you're seeing there is our social hall.
Oh, okay.
When we tried it out, we tried it in this larger room because for that particular class, with 35 people, we wanted to give as much airspace for COVID as possible. But the second time we used it, we moved into our smaller meeting room and it worked better there.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that size of space, it's getting a little bit echoey and the camera's a little low resolution at that distance.
I gotta say though, it really is pretty amazing. I'm embarrassed that I didn't think of this. I mean, the idea of putting it in the middle and having a screen on each side so everybody can really have an equal view and experience. It really is, it's just fantastic.
Yeah, and I sized it vertically so that there's clean eye lines over top of it. So if there's somebody on the other side, you can look at them and talk to them. And it's just a little bit of a look down to see the people online.
I'm really sorry.
Our
backlit.
Yes, I know that. I was actually going to mention that. Yeah, the windows.
The one of the things I have noticed though is the camera. And I think it's the owl itself. The camera, you're much sharper on your mobile phone than the owl is. I don't know if it's just how the owl. I don't know if David, if you've seen this, that the owl is
the cropping. It's the cropping. It's like digital cropping of the owl.
And the camera is just not. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's just not a great quality camera.
And then I assume because of the flexibility, it's running wireless. The whole device is running wireless.
Yeah, we're running wireless in the room, and we did think about adding a Wi-Fi extender into our smaller meeting space, but it actually worked out that even with I think it had full bars, didn't it? When we put it over there?
I did have to.
Oh, you did add the extender.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, sorry,
so we did add it.
We got there's a temporary one in there now. The permanent one came in today.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we're adding Wi-Fi over there because it just was not. But that's just a building issue.
But if it mainly lived in a certain space, you could run an Ethernet line to it to solidify the experience?
Yeah.
It's just a computer. You can do anything to it. All the owl is the fancy webcam and speakers.
And a microphone array.
Yeah.
So I love this concept. I love the concept because if we can call any solution for this traditional, it would be to put a monitor on a rolling high stand and with a some kind of a microphone array underneath it and a loudspeaker, and then do you put it in the front? Do you put it in the back? Do you need two of these in a room, or how many? So I love the concept of the cart that has 4 monitors that everybody can see it. Everybody is looking at each other, and the the kind of auto tracking camera. I love the concept. It's simple. It works. I think, and for the price point, the components you've chosen, really work. I can see, over time, trying some different things to maybe improve the video quality, maybe a different kind of auto tracking camera, improving the audio quality with some arrayed microphones or something like that. Would increase the cost, but could give much higher performance as well. But I love the concept.
I wonder, does anyone know, is there another sort of 360 degree camera or tracking camera that could pull something like this off? Because I mean, I think we all agree that the video quality is not fantastic, but
what I'm seeing on the statistics of this meeting is where the owl is only sending 720, and I don't know if it's because they are on Wi-Fi or it's because of the camera. So first of all, then you need to be hardwired and not Wi-Fi. You need to kill the Wi-Fi. Don't turn it on, never again.
We can look up the specs of the Owl camera, but if the camera is putting out 720, that would be the panoramic.
Something else. So.
Oh, thank you.
Wait, hold on. I need to say something to Ezra. Hold on, Ezra. That's a fantastic build. I love it. It's making me nervous. There's what about a little bumper along the bottom when you go through those doors? So if you catch a corner, you won't take that screen. Just something small along that edge, if you have the clearance to stick out from the screen a little bit. That just makes me a little nervous.
Yeah, it's definitely a consideration.
Or throw a packing blanket over the whole thing.
Just something. That's a great build, and I love it. I absolutely love it. But man, I can see corners being something. Oof.
Yeah, I can see. I think we all agree the corners are going to be the worry of the moving. But as a first concept or as a first working prototype, or if whatever you want to call it, I think it's just outstanding. It's knocked it out of the park. We it's like anything. We can all pick holes in it, and we have on bits, but it's not that. It's you've actually demonstrated something that's a use case that I think a lot of us are going, I need something that I can actually deliver, and I think it's really, really good. And it's a great achievement.
Thanks, Ira.
So I don't know of another 360 camera that's affordable, but there are other products like the Jabra Panicast, which is 180 degrees, that does some auto tracking, and so you might need more than one, but they are reasonably priced too.
The Owl does do 1080p. I'm wondering if the reason that it's at 720 is because we're on Wi-Fi. We haven't tried wiring this in yet.
Probably Wi-Fi, because you're just sending 720. That's it.
Just out of, although I just very quickly, Rabbi Dan, just on your video settings you are sending high definition on Zoom.
I'm pretty sure we are.
Curious. Just very curious. You're just video settings, and then it says HD.
I've got HD. No, I know where it is. Yeah, no, it's
The
only thing I'm not doing is touching up my appearance. So this is how bad I normally look.
I think we all have that problem, but that's.
Yeah, no, it's on HD and it's mirroring my video.
I as I said, I don't think that's not, all of these things can be, it's getting the first thing out, which is the best thing in this case. It's getting a first thing, we can always look at ways of improving it. I also think that one of the things that you talked about in the use case, which is quite interesting, and you said about that, you know, if you lead the meeting from one end, you don't necessarily always need to have 360 degrees, and you don't actually need to have it in that center, because you can always lead its, you know, if its focus is on, as you're sitting where you are now, Dan, and you bring it closer to you, it doesn't have to necessarily be super in the middle of everything, because not every, you know, you want it to get the main speakers or the main people that are talking.
Right, yeah, if I mean, I would think that it would be an interactive session that you would use this in. But if you were just going to be sharing, I mean, we could use this if we wanted to share a PowerPoint in an all in-person meeting. We could run it through this as well. I mean, that 4-screen setup is quite versatile in that regard. We designed it for Zoom, but it could be used for kinds of things as well.
We fortunately have got you for, we're at 37 minutes of the 45 minutes you said you could loan us today. I just want to go around the room and ask if anybody else has any questions for Dan, because I think it's great. Tobias.
Yeah, just for changing the owl's modes, like to get rid of the panorama view, is that operated on the owl physically, or is that on a computer software?
Well, I think David said that there's a software. It's certainly not physically on the camera. So they have a Mac app, I guess, that'll run and let me control those functions. I haven't.
So I have it here. Unfortunately, I can't show it to you because I don't have an owl camera with me, and so you don't see anything unless you have an owl connected. But there's an iPad app, there's an iPhone app, Android app, and they just released for Mac and PC an app that allows you to take down that banner.
I was just seeing if I could grab it quickly, but I don't think so. Anything else, guys? Oh, there's the Meeting Owl app. Okay. Well,
I'm out of questions because it's just so comprehensive. What the thing that you've delivered has been great.
Yeah, really grateful to you, Rabbi Dan, for for creating this and sharing it with us. Just fantastic.
It's my pleasure. I think what you guys do, and I've watched your shows, at the beginning of the pandemic, and you're an incredible resource. I appreciate what you're bringing to the various communities and other faith communities that tune in. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Before you disappeared, Rabbi Dan, can you just tell everybody which synagogue you're at and where they could follow you and find you on social media?
So I'm at Temple Shalom in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I'm the senior rabbi. It's a Reformed congregation, about 925 households. You can follow me on social media at Rabbi Dan Mosk, Rabbi Dan Moskovitz. That'll get you there. Also on Twitter and Facebook under the same thing. And it's Temple Shalom with 2 O's, templeshalom.ca.
And it's Dan as in DAN.
Right. The try.
Thank you again. Thank you. That's a great starting point today.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you again. That's a great starting point today, and we've covered a whole load of really interesting things and seen something that's I do think is innovative in this area. As always, what we want to try and do also is get to some questions that people have put in, some of the questions that we see in the regular forums. So this is in the Synagogue Tech Forum, this is in the Dreaming Up Forum, this is in some of the other forums that are out there, and try and give some answers where we've got a panel of experts to try and get some different views and have a discussion about the points that have come up. This week, David, you've been looking around to find some questions for us and see where we can go. So I'm going to ask you to open us up to some questions.
Absolutely. So I'll start with one that maybe builds off of what we were just hearing about. This writer or questioner was asking for points for Zooming services and maintaining contact with both the people in the Zoom and in the room.
Rotem, and then Tobias.
Pretty difficult to do both of them. It's like when you're with contact with other people in the room, you usually try to speak with them, and then you leave the people in the Zoom. My best suggestion, if you try to do that, is to put like a big screen behind the people that you're talking to, and maybe try to look at the screens and the people, and put the camera like in eye level and look at it from time to time, and be director, like speak directly to the people on Zoom, so they will know that they're there, and you're notice them.
Tobias, and then Marty.
So I think there's kind of two types of people that are going to be on your Bima. There's going to be people who are already thinking kind of hybridly, and they're going to more easily just come up with, please rise to your feet, or if you're at home, take a firmer posture in your chair. They're going to have those kinds of double speaks ready to go. But then others who, especially if they've been on the Bima for a long time, they might always default to the presence of the people in the room. And so physical reminders in their view can really help to remind them that the Zoom people are there. So we've tried different monitors on the Bima, some just flat on the pulpit below us, which are not great because then you end up looking down. And actually, more than Rotem's idea of a big screen in the back, we have now an iPad on a very skinny stand in front of the pulpit, and a little below eye level, but closer. And that is, the people in the congregation see that, so that also helps the people in the congregation know that it's a dual experience, which I think is worth the eyesore of having the iPad on the Bima if it connects both the leader and the congregation to the fact that there's more going on. And if you get a black stand and have a black case, it can start just looking like a mic stand. We're used to those things.
Marty, to add to this?
Yeah, so what we're actually trying to overcome is what we call proximity bias, and that is for people who are presenting to a group of people is because they're sitting right in front of you. You're going to be the tendency is to look and address them, but more important than having monitors that you can see are knowing which camera, if there are multiple cameras in the room, knowing which camera is actually showing you at the moment. And that is the function of a tally light. So each camera can have a little LED light. It doesn't need to be bright, just bright enough to be able to notice it. And then you know which camera you need to look at. And the worship leaders, more than lay people who are coming up to the Bima to do readings or announcements or something, the worship leaders who are always there need to train themselves to look at the cameras just as they would be scanning the room to look at people for any reason at all. They need to look at the cameras as well. It's just something that people need to be conscious of as worship leaders, and that creates the eye contact with your audience.
Quickly go back to David and then to Tobias, and we'll move on.
Yeah, these are all such great suggestions. In some ways, I think that we're going to have to have a little bit of a shift in the way we think about leading prayer across the board. I watch a lot of Stephen Colbert, and there was a shot in the show last night where the camera backed up and you could actually see the full set. And on those sets, in those scenarios, they don't worry about cameras blocking the audience's view, like you were saying, Tobias, that little iPad, because they recognize that there are going to be moments when Stephen Colbert pays special attention to the people in the audience. There is that component, and that's a vital component. And I think the audience feels connected to the performer. And most of the time, the performer is focused not on the people in the room, but the people who are not in the room. And the tally light, I think, is a great idea, so they know where to look. But this really is going to take a little bit of a shift if we want to do this well in how we think about leading services.
Finally, Tobias.
When building a cue sheet for a service, I just try to make sure that there's an explicit Zoom relating or live stream relating moment quite early in the service. That way, people who are watching on Zoom know, okay, this is an engagement for me. I'm actually part of this. And if you don't get that in the first few minutes, you start to fade away in your connection to the experience. But like one of the things we try to do as often as we can is have someone light candles at home close to the beginning of the service and project that into the room. And then it's a very clear moment for everyone in the room and everyone on Zoom. We're all in this together.
Some great answers. I think we're learning a lot about this at the moment. We're learning a lot. Everything is moving forward, and it's new. And I think sometimes we forget how fast we are moving and how fast and new it is, and that this isn't something where we've had proven ways of doing this for a very long time. David, moving on to the next question, please.
So we had a number of questions about combining Zoom and live stream. I think it's obvious that you can live stream from Zoom, but is that the best way to push what you're sending into Zoom out also to YouTube or Facebook?
Can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah. The question is about combining Zoom and live streaming. So we're not just sending to Zoom. We want to do what we're doing here, right? We are now Zooming and we're sending out to YouTube and Facebook and a whole bunch of other places. So the question is doing that through Zoom the best way to do that, or are there other ways that we should consider?
So Rotem and then Marty.
So it really depends what you're trying to do. If you want to engage, if you need to have the conversation with like the people at home, Zoom is the best place to be because it's zero latency. You can speak flawlessly like we're doing right now, and you can push the Zoom to restream like Leo do, and then like put it to multiple places all the time. You need to remember that the regular Zoom account is only 360p. You need to go to Zoom. You need to ask them, please make my account 720. If you got a bigger account, you can make it 1080. And then your live streams will start to look as good as a live stream if you're not going through Zoom.
Marty.
So Rotem is right. There's two different kinds of webcasts that you do with Zoom and with anything else, because anything else is going to be a one-way experience. The viewer is passively watching and really can't interact in any way other than chat. So depending on what you're trying to do. The other part of this question is being able to determine and control what the viewer on YouTube or Facebook is actually seeing, because when you stream from Zoom to these other platforms, Zoom kind of has control over what is shown. So, and you have to really work hard at manipulating on your screen as the host what is sending out. So if you have to have your speaker view or your gallery view, and you have to have it in full screen, and that is going to make a big difference to what is showing to YouTube or Facebook if Zoom is sending it. But if you're using something like OBS or vMix to switch your cameras, then if you stream from vMix or OBS, then you have absolute control over what you're sending. Not only the kinds of pictures, the format, and the video quality as well.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of interesting points on there, and you've said it. The key difference is, as being discussed, is one is a meeting platform, and one is a streaming platform. And if what you're trying to do is have a meeting, and in a lot of cases, worships is a combine of people, there is a huge attraction to using Zoom. If, on the other hand, what you've always done in the past is to put streaming in one direction, then that's where we're going. David, can we move on to the next question? We've got quite a few to get through.
There's one more point we should point out, though. If you're just streaming to Zoom and then having Zoom stream out to somewhere else, you're only sending out one stream. But if you're sending out to Zoom and to YouTube, now you're sending out two different streams, and you're doubling the bandwidth that you need to send those streams out.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Just as a follow-up, am I allowed to do that, Leo? Am I allowed to take privilege?
Yeah.
I mean, so then, given that, if you have concerns about bandwidth, it seems that you should just allow Zoom to do that encoding work. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I would agree. And also, Zoom is actually super efficient at that. It will use the bandwidth that it has and maximize it. It's not going to like it when half the bandwidth is taken up by something else that it doesn't know about, and you're fighting something that the two won't know about each other, and they will try and do it. And most of the streaming systems either are at a fixed rate, so they don't go up and down. So they'll take what they've got and expect to get it. So it is quite difficult to balance that out.
Great.
Okay, let's move on to the next question.
Sure. Next question. What resources do you use with your congregation to streamline the complexities added with multi-access or hybrid event planning and execution? So less about the actual production of the event and more about what are some tools or resources that we use to help manage the complexities about the planning and execution of those events.
So I've got Marty and then I've got David.
Couple of things. First is documentation and information. That the more documentation and the more information that you can disseminate to your team members, the better off they will be able to prepare themselves and prepare what they're doing, either technically or mentally or logically or whatever. The other thing is on the technical side, to streamline things. If you have a simple system, it can actually be quite complex to operate. But if you want to have a system that is simple to operate, the technical side actually can be quite complex, because it takes that kind of complex automation and programming to boil things down to very simple single or two button pushes. Everything that happens behind those buttons can take some work and some planning, but that's the way you can make it simple to operate.
David.
I actually just got my entire synagogue here on Slack. And now I know that Slack is old school. I know that Discord is the new big hot thing, but I was afraid of pushing too far. But I have to say that having, not streamlined, that's not really the word, but hashtag conversations, right? Knowing where everything is being discussed, having the right people in each threaded. Thank you. Having the right people in each conversation is that make a difference over emails and texts and this, that, and the other thing. It just, knowing you have the right people in the conversation when you're planning for an event and there's one centralized place where all the information will live is just fantastic. It has been for us.
Tobias, on this.
Yeah, in our service planning cue sheets, I think we used to take the auxiliary roles for granted, or they were handled separately from our kind of executive director side of things. You know, what maintenance would be there, what have you. But now that there's a few more roles of who's going to be spotlighting, who's going to be doing the prayer slides and all that, we now have anyone who's involved in the service is on the main service cue sheet. So that way we can all be on the same page for that.
So the point that David raised, which I think is a really interesting one about using Slack, and there are other things out there. Everybody starts with something like WhatsApp or Signal, which are great ways of having groups, but effectively all the conversations are in one bucket. And if you're suddenly trying to have a thread about something, so you're trying to deal with who's going to be dealing with Havdalah at the same time as you're trying to deal with who's going to be doing another part of the weekend, it becomes messy. And the nice thing about using some of these things, and I think it's a great way to look at it, Slack, you can start off free. In fact, you can use Slack free, but then you lose the history, but it's fine. You can really get a lot better control over your messaging and better control over it than something like email. Okay, moving on to the next question.
Yeah, we haven't paid a penny for Slack yet. We probably should, but we haven't had the need to yet. Let's see here. Well, here, this is connected to the Zoom machine. Setting up a space, for example, a Beit Midrash, sort of a room or house of study, to run shiurim, to run classes for those both in the room and on Zoom. So best suggestions for setting up your space, for designing that space.
So I think we saw a really good example earlier. And I think that what I also think is really important in some of these is to have a space that's consistent. A Beit Midrash, one of the things that's consistent about it in most places is you know where everything is, you know where you go in there and you're looking at something that's a similar layout all the time. And I think that's something we're going to have to start getting used to, is start seeing how the technology will sit in a room, similar to the way that it does in classrooms at schools. We're seeing evolution of that. There are a lot of cameras that come out that follow people around. Well, that's great if somebody's walking and talking and that sort of thing, but we're seeing that environment, and we want that technology to be an aid and not to be the primary focus. And I think that's the big thing that I'd like to start seeing, is less of this like, oh, you walk into a room and all you can see is the technology. It's like, this is a room to do something, to learn and to study, and the technology just happens to be in it. Rotem.
Don't forget to control the audio, because my main issue with the owl is that the sound is not good. And at the end, as a video guy, more than 50% of the video is an audio. So just buy a lavalier mic, a small Rode Go, whatever, something cheap. You don't need to buy and invest a lot of money in microphones, but at the end you need to control the audio, and you need the people on the other side will hear you pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's the same that everybody says. It's that you can start off again, if technology becomes the barrier because of the audio, as you've talked about, or technology comes with a barrier because of the video is breaking up, etc., then it just gets in the way of what you're trying to deliver, and that's a key point. Okay, it's pretty long, David, but I had an anonymous question that I passed to you.
Yeah, this is a great question. I saw this online, actually. It's just fantastic. The question is from Anne. What are some methods?
Anonymous, actually. It's from Anonymous.
Anonymous. My apologies.
It's me. It's my typing. Yeah.
My apologies.
Anonymous.
What are some methods you have used to block disruptive people from attending classes and services on Zoom? I'm both asking in general and in the case of a specific person who has been banned from a particular class or even the entire organization. And then this anonymous poster suggests some ways that they have tried it. Keep guests muted unless called upon, having a Zoom host, not just the teacher, so they can monitor in general and remove someone from the Zoom, limit chatting to the host and guest only, and not even making the service leader or teacher a co-host so that participants cannot chat the person who's teaching, keeping folks in the waiting room and cross-checking names with registration details, asking everyone to turn off their camera, even briefly, and limiting late arrivals. And the last piece of this question is, it seems like requiring registration for each person or household and sending them a unique Zoom link might help, but like many orgs, we prefer to use our main database for events and send the Zoom links in the confirmation email. Great question.
Thoughts, everybody? So I'm going to start with, let's start with Michael, and then I'll come back to you, David.
No, please.
Real simple one is that nailed it. All of those things all the time. Continue to use them. It's a checklist, essentially. We constantly have to monitor and change our settings as we go, depending on how we're interacting with the audience. So all of those things are things that I do all the time, almost automatically. So as far as best case, best use, all of those things.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. You're sorry, Leo. I think that, to me, the most important of these is having a Zoom host who can monitor in general and remove someone from the Zoom, but also keeping an eye on comments, watching the mute buttons, making sure, that if you don't have mute all set, that they can jump in and do that. And I also just want to mention that this isn't only an issue on Zoom, that it's an issue on YouTube and Facebook. We were talking before the show about how there are some bad actors that pop into lots of different shows like this one, and they just spam the comments. And one of the things that is a really vital piece of moving into the digital age well is not just producing content, but monitoring that content and monitoring also the people's interaction with that content. So removing bad actors and bad comments.
Rotem. And then Tobias.
Two things. First of all, you forgot annotation. Don't forget to disable annotation. I saw very important Zoom meeting that somebody controlled the annotation, and it was crazy.
Can you explain just very quickly to people what annotation is on Zoom? Annotation
on Zoom is that you can draw on the Zoom meeting
on a shared screen.
Yeah, you can draw on the Zoom on our faces right now, and everybody will see it it's somebody is drawing on a piece of paper. This is annotation.
I haven't seen. I've only seen it on a shared screen.
I saw that a lot.
So if there's just a sub thing, just if people want to know a place to go to find out how to test things on Zoom, any suggestions?
Zoom Test Kitchen is good place to be, and you can visit daily on office hours. Also,
yeah,
you can try over there, but there is a solution for what there is a specific solution for what this person is looking for. Zoom events. If you buy Zoom events, you can set an event concurrent every day, every hour, anytime you want, and you control the person that can go into the event, to the meeting or the webinar. So you can send a specific ticket to a specific email, and that person need to be on Zoom. Have to be his Zoom account, and he only can go inside the meeting. If somebody will try to go inside the meeting without his email, he cannot go to the meeting.
Okay, you were coming on this point, Tobias, and I then want to come back on what Rotem's just said there.
Well, why don't you just follow it up?
So I think this is really the crux of this problem. The crux of this problem has been, and it's the problem with technology from the beginning of time. It's the dilemma between I want simple access to I want to have control. And those of us who maybe were involved in email is exactly that. It was simple access, which is why we have spam. If they had ever put in the controls that they were supposed to put in right at the very beginning, we wouldn't have had spam. Sorry, it's firework night tomorrow night in the UK, and if you're hearing the bangs, it's because all the fireworks are going off at the moment. So this is key. We've got to work out that dilemma. And I think some of the questions was really interesting. Do I want to control who has access? Do I want to control who has access to our synagogues? Ideally, we would like to have open doors. Can we have open doors all the time? Or do we need to be able to control it? And I think we're always trying to find those levels. And technology is just another area. Tobias.
Yeah, great points. A couple more things. Zoom does allow you in the zoom.us website where you access the deeper settings. You can block users from certain countries, like anyone coming from a country. So if you're getting really spammed by true spammers coming from, you could say only let people in from the country you're in or something like that. And another couple of functions, I'm not sure if you mentioned in that initial question, just right-clicking on someone's screen and clicking stop video, which will prevent them from turning their video back on until you invite them to. And so this is also something that happens not with the extreme example of a Zoom bomber, but in a classroom setting, you notice a kid is moving around and distracting visually. You can just click stop video and then ask if they're ready to come back on. And also waiting rooms recently became more useful in that in a waiting room, you can have two-way communication. So a Zoom host could send someone back to a waiting room. You can, if your waiting room's enabled, you can throw someone back there, and then you could message them, tell them, this is an environment where we're not talking about politics or whatever the infraction was. You could have a little two-way chat that's hidden, and then if you want to come back in, I'll let you back in. That kind of thing.
Marty, and I think then we'll move on this. Yeah. There's always one we can't hear you, Marty.
So Zoom does allow you a fair amount of control over many different aspects of registration and being able to unmute microphones and turn on your camera. And Anonymous listed a bunch of potential remedies and ideas. And so is everybody else. Now, you can, when you're in a meeting, and registration is one important way to at least see who is registered for your meeting, and to, the requirement to register is one important aspect of control. And when you're in a meeting or a webinar, you can remove someone, either temporarily or permanently, ban them. But one of the things that's missing is the ability to remove their registration and their access before you start a meeting or a webinar. So if you see somebody is registered who you know is going to be disruptive, you really can't remove them from that list or block their access until the meeting has started and they have joined the meeting. I think that's one limitation that they're falling short on.
Okay. David, have we got any more questions?
I got one more for you. And this one is for Tobias specifically. How do you manage without overwhelming the clergy?
How do I manage?
Not you. It's not really just for you. How should synagogues, churches, how should we manage all of this without the clergy being overwhelmed? And I'll just put an editorial comment on this, that this is actually the worst question to ask someone like Tobias or myself or Dan Moskovitz, because we don't, I think, get overwhelmed by this. I think we get excited by it.
If anyone else wants to jump in, I'm trying to think of the entryway to.
So I'll start with an answer on some of this as the non-clergy, or some of the non-clergy on this. I think the reality is that there was a time at the beginning of this that we looked at some of the clergy as superheroes and trying to do absolutely every single part. And it was also forced on them when you had the beginning of lockdown, and it was like, you only can work in the box that you're in. And it was literally, they had to do all their broadcasts from the box they were in. It was super tough. What we now have is that we have the ability to be able to have the remote assistance. We're able to say that certain people can do certain elements of it. Tobias touched on it earlier when he was talking about the ability to have people lighting the candles from home. You're having the ability to bring space into a service so that certain elements can happen without it all being concentrated on one person. And I think that is super important, because otherwise it just ends up being a marathon for that one person. And we all know that if you keep running 2 marathons a week, 52 weeks of a year, you're not going to be doing them for very long. So
you'll break both of your legs very quickly.
You break both of the legs. And I've already seen it with some rabbis and other leaders who are having to take sabbaticals because they've just literally run out of things. Which is actually quite helpful for some of us in the Jews in the pews that we hear different sermons, but that's another side of it. Tobias.
Yeah. So sometimes I'm aware that there's an even better technological way to do something I'm doing, but it will require more work. And I'll sometimes say, okay, on this count, even if I'm only getting to 80% of my vision, that's what I have to realistically accept for this project. So for example, for the High Holy Days, where we were in Zoom meetings as our main distribution, and in my heart of hearts, I wish we had many people lined up for honors to project them on Zoom, which we do on Shabbat. But for the High Holy Days, so many variables in the air, so many people, we weren't able to make it as interactive with the Zoom. And that's all we could manage. And that's okay. Another example that came to mind with that is when preparing a class, instead of using a shared screen, my preferred is to use OBS and have the text appear on the same screen as me. But sometimes that takes more work to set up. And so I'll accept, okay, shared screen has its flaws, but just to keep my workflow manageable, I won't go to the best possible hybrid solution or technological solution. I'll do what can fit in realistically.
Marty, you had some points on this?
Yeah, I'm not a clergy either, but clergy are busy people. You know, they not only have to plan and conduct services and do congregational care and interface with the board of trustees and teach classes. Technical director, production director, video director, these have never been parts of the job description. And, you know, it's a huge responsibility and a lot of time to do these things well on top of everything else that they've always been responsible for doing. And I would suggest teamwork, you know, is an important aspect of this. To put together not just a technical team, but a worship team or worship production team, because as we talked about, documentation and planning and, you know, figuring out camera positions and figuring out order of service and run of show documentation. These are all things that require time on an every week basis, and to have other people take on these responsibilities can really free the clergy up to do what they need to do.
Tobias, and then I've just got one last point on this, and then we'll wrap. Tobias.
And I think if your role, not if you're the rabbi, but if you're the one kind of bringing a clergy up to speed or on some new process that you're doing at the synagogue, try to go people first, unless you know they're the technical rabbi or technical cantor and want to hear why the owl, how that it crops in, that it doesn't scan, blah, 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 blah. A lot of what we talk about and are interested by, but for I think the average clergy person, they want to know, this is going to let you see the people while you're teaching. This is going to let the people see you while you're teaching. Like really focus on what the human and use case element is, and not as much on the technical ins and outs. And that'll make them more excited that this is getting installed, more excited to vouch for it in budgeting and whatnot, because most clergy care less about the technology and care more about the people.
Thank you for that. I think this is a really good place to stop. I would say that one of the great things about all of this is that what you see when you see really good services, they are not really good services that have just appeared. They are things that people have worked on. That good presentation on all of these things, and the ability when you see that, it's people have put a lot of effort in, so that what you end up seeing at the end is that end. We've seen today how the world is moving forward. We saw a technology that we've all been adopting and seen for a long time with the Zoom, moving into an environment that actually you can see the future, that we can use this in a classroom environment or in a meeting environment where it isn't intrusive, it's in there, and the bit where you're looking at the eye line straight over. We've seen questions about the difficulty that we're going to have with some of this, and I think we're going to have more problems. We may not having the Zoom bombing that we've had in the past, but we definitely are going to have some of those issues that are going to be related to how you control and how you deal with things. As everything matures, you end up with more problems as well as better solutions. So I'd like to thank the panel for being here today. I'd like to thank Dan for his demonstration earlier. If you want to follow us, please look at the Synagogue Tech Forum. Please look at Dreaming Up, and please look at Marty's Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum. We're going to be here every other week. The in-between weeks, Marty takes over with a slightly later show on the daytime or evening for us in Europe. And for those here, thank you again, and thank you to the panel. Good night. Tobias.
Do I have to cut it?